And if that little start and stop in the beginning doesn't tell you that uh, we're kind of still figuring things out back again. Welcome, everyone, to the reunion special of Shaken Not Heard, a James Bond fan cast with your hosts, Elliot Serrano and Dave Pino. I have not said this in a long time. How you doing, Dave?
I'm all right. It has been a long time.
It has. I mean, It's been a while. I was looking at our at the Shaken Not Heard YouTube page and the Instagram, and looking at the most recent posts. I think I did something. I did a Christmas and New Year's posts on the Insta. Not a whole lot going on the Facebook page because, again, not a lot of news was going on.
Yeah.
Until recently.
Yeah.
And it was, and then we kept saying, well, we'll come back once there's something to talk about, and now there's something to talk about.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly.
So for folks who have never watched the show before, Shaken Not Heard is a show where, this is how it started. Dave, being a big James Bond fan, was kind of schooling me on how James Bond, the movies differ from the books. So I said, hey, why don't we do a show where we go through every James Bond movie and we'll discuss them. And one of the things we would do was we would talk about how the movie compared to the book. And I learned a lot about how James Bond was adapted over the years. And it really helped me understand, let's just say it gave me a fresh perspective on it. And it helped me get a better understanding of what you have to go through to adapt a property like James Bond. And to the point where it's like, whenever I see other James Bond fans complaining about certain things that are happening with the movies or whatever, I'm like, seriously, you're looking at like the early Bond films through rose-colored glasses. It's very much like what happens now with the Marvel movies and Star Wars and and Star Trek. There's a lot of fandom that don't. They just seem to have this strange perception of what the overall franchises are like. And they kind of like put them in a box to fit their own perspective, not realizing that if they go back and they look at the earlier stuff, it doesn't fit into their particular perspective at all.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk today about, because there are no new James Bond films, we are going to talk, though, about the transition of the James Bond franchise from Eon Productions to Amazon. Something that we've been talking. Well, we have talked about it like off the air, just personally, you and I.
Yeah.
Nothing official ever happened. I think the last big news came out was that Barbara Broccoli called the folks at Amazon, like idiots, like they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah,
I think
it's very encouraging. Calling them idiots and then sell the franchise to those same people, right?
I mean, after a while, it's like, you did your bit, right? 20 some Bond movies. That's a bit of a legacy, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I mean, they made more Bond movies than George Lucas made Star Wars movies.
That's true. Yeah.
And not only do we talk about the Bond films, but if you go back and you look at all the episodes that we did, not only for Shaken Not Heard, but also the MCU Review, the sister program to Shaken Not Heard, we would have a themed drink with each episode. And to do that, we had our own resident mixologist, Thomas Jutner, do that for us. And look, who's in the green room, and here he is. Hey, Tom.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
And I will say to you the same thing I said to Dave. Wow, it's been a while.
Yes.
We haven't the three of us haven't really gotten together in quite some time, not since the last show. And between me, Dave and I, we no longer work at the same place. I also no longer work downtown, so it's not easy for me to just meet you guys in a coffee shop or something. So,
Yeah.
but we have to remedy that at some point.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so let's jump into things because we've got. I want to make this a good, lean episode, and I know you guys have your thoughts, so we're not going to dilly dally too much. It's not like we have to review a movie or go through all these different segments. But the first thing I want to dive into is the news of Eon Productions, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson finally saying, you know what, we're kind of done here. We're willing to move on now. Amazon owns the IP. They can do what they're going to do. Let me ask you first, Dave. What did you think when you heard the news?
Well, I was shocked, to put it mildly. It's truly the end of an era. I mean, this is Bond was the last, really, as strange as it sounds, sort of a elite top tier franchise that was not in the hands of some big giant corporation. This is basically, it's a property that's basically been in the hands of basically the same family since the beginning, since 1962. So you had Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman for the first several decades, and then Cubby gave way to his daughter Barbara and Michael G. Wilson, and they sort of shepherded the franchise since the early 90s, at least since the Pierce Brosnan era, and now it's in the hands of a giant corporation. So we'll see how they handle things. I'm not too optimistic, but I figured it's worth giving them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, if they just knock it out of the park with the first movie, which I think is what you have to do. You can't have sort of like a humdrum first movie as the sort of set the tone for this, if you want to call it, second era of the Bond, or maybe third era of the Bond franchise. You're going to lose a lot of fans and a lot of interest that way. They really have to knock it out of the park with the next movie. But it's they have a lot to prove now, because I know a lot of people don't like Amazon for a lot of different reasons, and now the people who were Bond fans and already not the biggest Amazon fans have even more of a reason not to like them and more reason to be skeptical. So we'll see. I mean, it's like I said, there's a tall order with the next movie to really put people's minds at ease, especially the real long-term diehard fans like myself, who are not that I've loved every single Bond movie or loved every single decision made with the movies, but even the bad ones are still enjoyable and have fun, redeeming qualities about them. And there's never been any doubt, for me at least, with every Bond movie, even when like I said, the weaker ones, that there wasn't an attempt made to make the best possible product. Now, did they succeed? Have they succeeded every single time? No, but you could tell they gave it their all, and they put their money where their mouth is, and tried to hit a home run every single time. You're not going to hit a home run every single time, but and that's, again, you're dealing with a small, basically sort of a family unit doing this. And now, again, Amazon, it's a totally different animal. So we'll see if they can carry that torch in a respectable manner.
I will say, the moment Jeff Bezos put out, hey, who should we cast as the next Bond? I was like, no, don't do that. Don't let the fans decide.
Yeah. And the actors that I didn't read too much into it, but the guys that I saw him naming are like, it's like all the same websites, the stupid tabloid same names of the stupid tabloid websites. It's Tom Hardy, Idris Elba, Henry Cavill. It's not going to be any of those guys unless they go completely against what Eon has historically done and not cast a relative unknown and cast someone who people have kind of pigeonholed as Bond for the last decade. I mean, the only time that really happened was with Pierce Brosnan. Every other guy who was ever cast as Bond was either sort of a left field choice or someone that wasn't really a big star, and Bond turned them into a star. So Henry Cavill, whether you like him or not, is a star. Everybody knows who he is. Same thing with Idris Elba or Tom Hardy, whoever. If Bond was still in the hands of Eon, I could guarantee you it would not have been any of those guys. One, because again, they're already household names, and two, at the rate at which they make these movies, and I'm thinking one of the big changes with Amazon now is they're going to try to go back to getting a movie out every few years as opposed to like every 5 or 6 years. If you cast a guy who's already like his late 40s, how long can he convincingly play Bond? This is not like casting Roger Moore when he was 45, but you were still doing a movie every other year. So even though he already started to age out of the role, 4 movies in, he still was able to get 6, 7 movies out because they were cranking him out with such regularity. It's a different time now. Things work a little bit differently.
How old was he when he did that last one? Was it A View to a Kill? Was the last one? 58.
He was 58 years old. And he was a much older looking 58 than like Daniel Craig would look at 50. Daniel Craig, I don't think he's 58 yet. He's getting there. Craig, I'm sure, will look better at 58 than Roger Moore looked at 58 in A View to a Kill.
Yeah, it's getting a little leathery there, with a bit leathery.
A little long in the tooth.
And Tom, what did you think when you heard the news?
It's like, with a family business, you can always tell that even the rough parts are made with love. And I feel like it's gonna be shiny, and it's gonna lose that rough, that every Bond movie, even though they're always set in glamorous locations, you always get the sense that they're made a little bit on the fly by people who do it because they want to do it. It's kind of like, the thought that comes to mind is a little bit like the Muppet Show, where it's, Barbara Broccoli is just kind of Kermit the Frog behind the scenes, holding, this random collection of people who have just been doing this for so long together. And I have no doubt that the Amazon movies are going to look great. I have no doubt that the production values are going to be terrific. But, it's like when your favorite dive bar gets a makeover. You lose a little bit of that character that made it great, that made you fall in love with it in the first place. My record on Amazon is at least a little bit positive because I do like Rings of Power. I do think that's been fun and entertaining for what it is, especially the most recent season. But I don't know how they're going to handle this. And with the Broccoli family, you knew that even if it wasn't the most coherent plot in the world, you were going to have fun, that they were going to take care of you. So that's not there anymore. It's not coming back.
Yeah.
So it's going to be different. Some of the stuff might be good, but it will never be that slightly shaggy around the edges franchise that you kind of come to love, which is a little bit sad because I feel like we need, as I think my last couple of Bond-related Instagram posts for drinks have shown, like we kind of really need a British spy who can throw an evil billionaire out of a blimp these days. That would be something useful to have right about now.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there. This is kind of, a world that could really use a James Bond.
Yeah.
And it's it's a bit of a bummer. Just a note on the drink before we move on. I went back to the books for this one, and I started reading the texts on when Bond orders the original Vesper, and I was thinking about Bond ordering an Americano. Dave, what book was that he orders? Was that Casino Royale at the beginning, or was that?
I think something happens in one of the short stories, not A View to a Kill, but it might be one of the short stories in that collection where he orders that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know he does it at some point in the books, and also Ian Fleming's known love of gin and tonics. And I thought, okay, if I'm mapping a flavor profile for what he likes explicitly seems to be aperitif cocktails, something before dinner, and something high in volume, if not necessarily high in alcohol content. So I tried to think bitter and sweet at the same time because, I mean, believe it or not, one of the retrying the Vesper, it's surprisingly sweet, even though there's only half a measure of Lillet Blanc of a Quino Lillet in that. It goes a long way. It's a surprisingly sweet ingredient. So sweet, bitter, and then that kind of thought of like, all right, I'll use the lime husks and I'll use honey syrup and I'll throw in some ginger there, and that'll kind of make a nice kind of spritz type aperitif drink that would fit the flavor profile. Is it my favorite drink? No, but I feel like it's something that I could see Bond pounding 2 or 3, or at least having one very large one on a beach in Jamaica or something like that. So that's kind of where I went with it.
It's very tasty, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm enjoying one right now.
Good.
Sans the mint. That was the only thing I didn't have was the mint. I'm a completist, so I really wanted.
I don't have any mint. I don't have any mint tonight either, so it's fine.
And as you can see here on the screen, this is the drink that Tom put together. You can always go to Review Cocktails on Instagram, where you see all the different drinks that Thomas has created, whether it's recreating a Bond drink for the Shaken Not Heard cast or just a different themed drink for most every Marvel movie. We had a drink for most every Marvel movie. We didn't have it quite in the beginning because I think you didn't come on board until a couple episodes in to start doing the drinks. So, but there's like a whole bunch of stuff there.
Yeah, I think there's a total between MCU and Indie. I think there's like 22 individual original drinks on that list, on that page.
Someone's got a book he should be putting together. So let's see. What were the? You said the 1.5 ounce of London dry gin could use up to 2 ounces. 1 ounce honey syrup, 0.75 ounces of lime juice, a knob of fresh ginger, soda water, and mint.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we calling this?
I don't. I wanted to call it. I wanted to call it the Goldeneye. The Goldeneye Highball or the Golden Highball, something like that. But that name was already taken by another drink, and I kind of came up blank trying to think of another name because I figured like, all right, this is really when you really, really break it down because I've got a ginger and I've got sweetener with soda in there. Like honestly, this is kind of a deconstructed gin mule. So I feel like someone's probably done this somewhere. Yeah. Probably actually stealing somebody else's drink. So I couldn't think of a name. So I'm just going to call it the. I guess I'll just call it the Broccoli Family Highball. I guess so.
I like that. All right. So again, if you want to make this at home, or any of the previous drinks that have been created for the MCU review, or yes, that's right, Top Men and Indiana Jones. Podcast, we had drinks for those as well. So you can go to Top Men Indie Podcast. Oh, actually, all the cocktails are on Review Cocktails. So whether it's an indie cocktail or an MCU or a Bond cocktail, you'll find them all there. And try them at home. All right. So, well, gentlemen, I guess what leads me to think at this point is mean, as far as Amazon having the IP now, they've done Reacher. They do a fairly decent job with Reacher. They've also done Jack Ryan, the Tom Clancy series, and I really enjoyed the first season of Jack Ryan. Wasn't crazy about the second season, but then again, these are mini series that are made for TV, and I guess wasn't that a big bone of contention between Broccoli, Wilson, and Amazon? It was the whole look. If we're going to produce James Bond, they're going to be movies, and they're going to be at the theater. We're not going to do television series. We're not going to do all these different spin-offs. There's not going to be like, a Money Penny, young Money Penny origin story.
Yeah.
Although I've told you, Dave, about the Q book I wanted to write.
Yeah.
Do one with Q, which I think would be fun. But beyond that, that's a big thing that a lot of the Bond fans, when they heard this news, are like, they're gonna. And this is annoying when I hear this. I will admit, they're gonna Disneyfy it. They're gonna do like Disney, and they're gonna just corporatize it or whatever, or worse, make it woke. Which I swear to God,
people said that about No Time to Die because you had a female black agent becoming 007.
007. Yeah,
even though she relinquishes the designation at the end of the movie.
Right. So the whole thing, that this fear of the the franchise being sullied because now it's in corporate hands. I mean, like to Tom's point, yeah, it's not going to have that, that kind of that charm of being, again, a family project, have those rough edges, so to speak. And I know it's not going to feel like, Eon Bond. I will say, though, there are a couple things that give me a little bit of hope. And I'm gonna speak blasphemy in the eyes of some Bond fans. But Never Say Never Again was not an Eon production. And I'm telling you, you score that movie with a real Bond score, use the Bond theme, a real Bond theme song and score. It's amazing what a difference it makes. I remember, Dave, you showed me that, you sent me the link to that, to that version of No Time to Die that someone posted on YouTube where they put in, more of the Bond type music, and it improves it immensely. You never realize how much of a difference the music makes. So the point being that there are people who were outside of the Eon team and who get the Bond aesthetic. Yeah. And if they have all the elements, if they're able to use all the elements, I think they can make some pretty good Bond movies. Or at least the potential is there to make a really good Bond movie. Plus, now everyone's talking about Chris Nolan finally getting a shot at Bond. He wanted, apparently the news is, and I don't know how much I really believe, because the internet, they say the internet never lies. Well, it never gives you the complete truth either. And it's like he said he wanted to do a Bond movie, but Broccoli and Wilson really put a lot of constraints on him, and it would have to be, under their guidelines. And he was like, eh. And then he goes out and makes Tenet and Inception, all these movies that just reek of the Bond aesthetic.
I mean, there's even Bond stuff in the, like in The Dark Knight, like him going to, where is it, South Korea? Like, when do you ever see another Batman movie?
Hong Kong,
yeah. Where he uses
leaving the United States and just, doing cool shit internationally,
Yeah.
That's, he has it in him to do. I think when I said the thing about what they need to do to just hit it out of the park right out of the gates is, if you can get Nolan, if you, back a truckload of money into his driveway and say, here, do whatever the hell you want with Bond. That's how you win over a lot of, like, I know there's not every single person loves Christopher Nolan, but I'd say more people probably like him than dislike him, and he's an awesome filmmaker, and he clearly loves Bond. But yeah, he's a guy who wants total creative control over everything he does, and he wasn't going to get that with Eon. He wasn't going to get that with Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. But with Amazon, maybe it'll be a different story. Say, you can cast who you want as James Bond, and everything else, you know, it's the ball's in your court, that sort of thing. It's, I don't know if it's something where they would want him to do like want him to do a bunch of movies. I mean, it would be a coup in and of itself just to get him to do one. Even though, like I said, he clearly wants to do Bond. Is it going to be like, would it be like the Dark Knight trilogy where he spends the better part of the next decade of his career working on, you know, a trilogy of Bond movies or whatever? But even if you just get him to do one and sort of lay the foundation for where things will go in the future, that would be great.
I am want him to do one.
Was that?
I would vote. I would be down for him to like do one.
Yeah.
Do one and let that set the tone. I would not be too prime on him doing multiple films.
And I don't know if he would want to do multiple films.
He probably wouldn't want to,
because that's right. That's a guaranteed like box office smash every time. But again, it depends on whether he wants to commit the next chunk of his leg of his career focused just on James Bond, you know?
Right. I just am worried a little about, you know, that Sam Mendes follow up. You know, I wasn't big on Spectre as you know, compared
Most
to Skyfall.
People will not be.
Yeah. So that's just where my head is at. But just to set the tone would be fun.
I'm really curious what his pitch for Bond would be, because I know one of the things that's come up in the past has been like, and this is I'm pretty opposed to it for a few reasons, but you know, setting Bond back in the 60s or even if you're going by the books of the early 50s or mid 50s, I mean, a like period piece Bond could be very cool. But the reason I'm against it as like sort of the direction the movie's taking is, and I've made this point before, I feel like if you send Bond back to the prime Bond era, like the early Cold War, you're sort of a tacit admission that you can't think of a way to keep him relevant in the present, which part of my French, I think is bullshit, because even though he's very much a product of the Cold War, you know, he was created during that period. As long as there is, brought this point up earlier, Tom, as long as there's, and look around, everything happening in the world, as long as there's evildoers and world leaders and people doing nefarious things, there will always be inspiration. There will always be source material to draw from. Having said that, I think one of the things that has kept Bond so popular and kept it ironically relevant for so long is the movies have never been too political. Like they've always sort of like tread the line between, you're not, you know, case in point, you never have Bond going up against real world leaders. You know, post 9/11, you didn't have Bond going up against Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden. You had villains that are sort of like stand-ins for what those figures sort of represent, but he was never going after like direct, you know, nations or leaders or things like that. And I think avoiding doing that keeps the movies from being dated. Like you never had Bond single-handedly ending the Cold War. It's not Rocky IV, you know, it's Bond. That's always the backdrop of the movies. The movies I've always felt sort of existed sort of in like a parallel to the real world. Like these things could be happening. You just don't know they're happening because it's all, you know, spies and smoke and mirrors type stuff. So they've never gotten too political. Sort of your point, Elliot, like if you go too far to the left, you have all the people on the right saying, "Oh, it's too woke." If you have Bond too far to the right, you have the left saying, "Oh, he's a colonizer," or, you know, he's a fascist. So, you know, take inspiration sort of like from world events, have that sort of be the backdrop, but you're not going to have like an actor playing Elon Musk as a character or Vladimir Putin as a character. You know, you could have characters that are sort of stand-ins for what those figures represent, but not those actual people, you know, and that's how you sort of avoid and I think what you're saying, Elliot, about like the movies getting like woke or the criticism of that. I think if there's one big thing that Amazon could sort of, look to follow from Eon's example, is the movie sort of being a parallel, sort of almost slightly fantasized version of the real world, So anyway, like back, my main point being, I think in the short term, sending Bond back to the 50s or 60s period piece thing would be cool and might be very profitable at first, but I think it wouldn't be healthy in the long run for the future of the franchise.
Well, I mean, another thing you could do, I mean, I would say, let me first address the issue of, let's say, having Christopher Nolan do one movie or even doing a trilogy. Yeah. Mind you, when Chris Nolan worked on the Batman trilogy, Dark Knight, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, he did those 3 movies, but he also did other movies in between.
Yeah.
He did Inception, and I'm trying to remember the other movie that he did before. Between
The Prestige?
The Prestige, yes.
Yeah.
Because it's like Chris, like I'm on a first name basis. Nolan would do like his R&D for the next Batman movie on this next, like, I mean, it's like Christopher Nolan is here's the thing that kind of people don't realize. Yes, he's box office, but he's an independent filmmaker. He's doing his own R&D. He's very much like when George Lucas was producing Young Indiana Jones to figure out the technology that would later help him do the prequels. Mm-hmm. Nolan does Batman Begins, does The Prestige. Let's see. Okay, boom. Let's take that into The Dark Knight. After The Dark Knight, he does Inception. What are we going to learn from this? Let's fold that into the next movie. It's all put together. So I don't know if Christopher Nolan would feel like, I'm going to be stuck doing these movies for my life, but he still gets to do other things.
Yeah.
Plus, he's finally got that groove. It's no longer like, let's say, David Goyer and some other writers that are writing for him. He's doing the script with his brother, and he's got all, as you said, that control, and he can control the pace of how things are going as far as production.
Yeah.
So I could see, like, let's say, Amazon says, "Okay, Chris, we want you to do a James Bond trilogy for us, but it's a trilogy with a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're going to borrow what they did with the Daniel Craig, his run. It began with Casino Royale and ended with No Time to Die. Daniel Craig's Bond dies. Mind you, there are a lot of folks will say, but, the Broccoli's killed off James Bond. They meant to do that. Well, actually, no, because canon, as far as canon goes, even the Broccoli's have there is no definite canon going even through all the Bond movies because the continuity just does not work. It just doesn't work. Too much happens. Too many different things happen between one to the next to the next. So even within the Eon produced Bond movies, I can't figure out what canon is. But what I can say is that with Casino Royale, it begins with the Daniel Craig Bond to No Time to Die. Those are all the same Bond.
Yeah.
And mind you, everything that happens to that Bond, it's not like he lived through Live and Let Die or Dr. No. It's like he's a fresh new Bond going through these things.
Yeah.
So taking that idea, let Chris Nolan do a trilogy, and then there's a Chris Nolan Bond trilogy. And then you can, let's get another director, and we can put Bond in another era if we want. It's like Elseworlds Bond, like they do with Batman all the time. They have Batman going back into the 1600s and fighting Jack the Ripper and stuff. And people are like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. Let's do Bond in World War II. Let's do Bond here."
Well, my point about the kind of always the movie's always kind of looking forward and not to the past, other than the wink and nods to the DB5 coming back, or the references to On Her Majesty's Secret Service and No Time to Die. When they rebooted Bond with Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, they could have just as easily rebooted back to the 60s. but they said, we're going to reboot, have this Bond early in his career, but it's going to be set in the present. So this is a guy who's sort of in a post 9/11 war. The backdrop is the war on terror as opposed to the Cold War, except you're seeing him as sort of, the blunt instrument, where he's not fully fleshed out quite yet, but still early in his career. So I don't think they ever at any point would have considered rebooting to the classic era, the Bond mania 1960s. But maybe with Amazon, maybe they, depending on how they approach things and what kind of director they hire, maybe that person will see things differently and say, yeah, we're going to bring them back to the 60s. It's like I said, I'm opposed to that, but maybe I could be won over. I don't want to dismiss the idea entirely. I just think, like, my broader point is, even though the Cold War is long over, there's plenty of stuff always happening in the world that could inform the plot to a Bond movie. Bond as a film character has existed longer in a post-Cold War world than he ever did during the Cold War, which is crazy to think about. The franchise is 60 years old, and you had the first Bond movie post after the end of the Cold War in 1995. So there haven't been nearly as many movies during that period, but he could still be just as viable and profitable and relevant of a character, even, if you take him out of the Cold War era and put him into other, contexts of what's happening.
Well, what's always been good about the franchise, its ability to, and I'm going to kind of support what Dave was saying, and I'm going to cut against it a little bit, because I think what you're saying is true, but it may not be saying exactly what you think you're saying, is that in the way they've done Bond in the present, they've always echoed contemporary politics. They've always, in a sense, it has in fact it has not been apolitical. If you go back to thinking a lot about GoldenEye this week, because I think that was the first movie that Barbara Broccoli worked on, was the lead, took the lead on, that there was a lot in that movie that was deliberately calling attention to what the social politics were in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of has held true through, all the way through the Craig era. And you could kind of see a lot of that also in the 60s and the 70s as well. And piggybacking off of existing politics, whether that was American racial politics, or whether that was gender, or whether that, movies like The Spy Who Loved Me don't take place unless there is actual détente in the late 70s.
Yeah.
So far from being an escape from politics, it's kind of been an allegory or metaphor or an echo of things that are real and going on in the present day. And what's always kept it fresh, is you could use this character as a mirror, whether that was using him as, to reference GoldenEye again, as a dinosaur or a relic of a previous era, or to use him as something new, or, as they did, at least at the beginning of the Craig era. And being able to inject contemporary ideas every time you go. Thinking specifically about in Skyfall, where Silva kind of makes a pass at Bond.
Yeah.
And that interrogation, and Bond just looks at him very coyly, like, what makes you think this is the first time?
Yeah.
Like, that's the first time we'd ever seen that in a Bond movie. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
That's very much reflective of our politics of that era. The other thing that I think about is how, if you freeze Bond in amber, you give it an inability to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like, all right, Elliot, I have to go down an extremely nerdy history thing. So you're just going to have to kind of bear with me on this. And
we're used to it.
Okay. All right. So from the fall of the Roman Empire up through the Middle Ages, the Latin language continually evolved.
Oh wait, we're going all the way back to the Roman Empire now. Okay.
Oh yes. Oh
You
yes.
said nerdy history. Okay. I thought
Yes.
you were going to do
I
like
was
at
not.
least.
No, I was not kidding. So
All right.
so the Latin
Buckle
language.
up, folks.
Buckle up. Strap yourselves in. The Latin language continued to adapt and change, not just evolving into Italian and French and Spanish, but also adding new loan words into things that were like Church Latin or Vulgar Latin. It continued to grow. It continued to be a living language spoken by priests and clergy and nobles and people who could read it. And then around the 14th century, in an effort to, as part of that kind of early wave of Renaissance humanists, they said, no, Latin is Cicero. Latin is that the language of the orators in the last days of the Republic. Latin is what Cicero and Caesar and Pompey and Crassus and all those figures spoke, and Livy and what's the other poet? Aeneas, not Aeneas, the author of the Aeneid. What they spoke. So they stripped Latin of all of its new words, and they were really strict about the grammatical arrangements. And they took it all the way back to the 1st century BC, and it effectively killed it as a living language. And the reason why we don't use Latin in real terms today and as a practical language is because it was killed, not with the fall of Rome, but in the 14th century, in an effort to kind of freeze it in the area at the time period when it was quote unquote best. So that's what I would not want them to do to Bond. Don't freeze him in 1967.
Yeah.
Let that character continue to live and breathe and go on in a way that great characters should.
Yeah. And I think I agree. Your point about the movies not being apolitical, I don't disagree with that. I think the point I was making is the movies don't exist like in isolation from what's happening or geopolitically in in the world, in the time in which they're created. But you don't have like I said, you don't have Bond going up against real world leaders or him.
Yeah, it's
action that's like changing the course of history, other than sort of a more like small scale event that could have huge ramifications. But like, for instance, Diner of the Day was the first movie that came out post 9/11, Bond movie, I should say, but doesn't feel like a post 9/11 Bond movie. There's a very subtle passing reference. Bond gets freed from the North Korean prison camp, and M says something like, "While you were in North Korea, the world changed," and that's all it said. And then, but the rest of the movie is about giant satellite lasers and stuff like that. Whereas Casino Royale is really the first post 9/11 Bond movie, because it's there's direct references to 9/11, and the war on terror is in the backdrop, and the terrorism is a big part of the plot. But you don't have Bond going up against like Middle Eastern terrorists. Everything is sort of like a placeholder from stuff that's not super in your face as to what was actually happening in the news at the time. And that's more or less how it's been. I think it's a way to sort of have your cake and eat it too, where you're playing it safe and allowing the movies to be sort of escapism, but also not pretending that like what's actually happening in the world is not happening. Like I said, where it exists sort of in a parallel to our world that we're living in. And I think that's the way to kind of keep going. Like you said, don't freeze Bond in time. Don't pretend like world events aren't actually happening, that we're not living through them. But still allow the movies to be fun and escapist. That's basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah. You don't have to beat someone over the head with you can be subtle in your messaging.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
and part of that is being effective messaging is sometimes when it's there, but you don't even notice it.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, as far as the sort of like spin-offs and things of that nature, milking the IP for all it's worth, I'm not. I would be willing to give a chance to like an M prequel series or a Moneypenny series, but what I would really like, and I've also mentioned this before, if they were to do a TV series, a streaming series, I should say, I would love a series of faithful adaptations of the Fleming novels, set in the 50s, set in the early 60s, keeping the movies set in the present, keeping them contemporary, but and I don't know, that beats something where like, oh, you have the TV Bond confusing people, you got the streaming Bond, and then you've got the big screen Bond. I think you could do it if you could have 3 Batmans at the same time. Why can't you have a TV James Bond or streaming Bond and a big screen Bond? But that's something I've always wanted to see. I'm in the middle of rereading all the Bond books to Ben, and actually in the middle, I'm almost read at the end. I have one. We're in the middle of Octopussy and the Living Daylights. So that's the last Fleming book, and it's just like, man, some of these, because the books are so, as we talked about in the past episodes, the books differ so much from the movie. Many of them almost bear no resemblance to the movies. So doing them faithfully, but also having them set during the period in which they were written, would be really cool. Like I said, you can do the throwback period piece Bond, but have it be totally separate from the big screen Bond. And that's another thing. Bond has to be on the big screen. You can't have, there are certain franchises that just exist to be seen on the big screen, and Bond is one of them. I know that was one of the things, like during COVID, when that was No Time to Die was the first big movie to announce a delay because of the pandemic. And there was this push, like, because I lost track of how many different release dates it had before it finally came out. But there was this push, like, I'll just put it on streaming. And I was like, you can't experience a Bond movie for the first time, on Prime or whatever, like Netflix, like in your living room. We have to see it in the big screen. So at the end of the day, it was worth the wait. And that's how it should be for every Bond movie going forward. So I hope that's something Amazon understands.
And for the story about that adventure of Dave and I finally seeing No Time to Die, you want to go to the Shaken Not Heard Facebook or YouTube page, go back to that particular episode, and you'll see how Dave essentially jinxed us. And could have seen it one night, didn't, because Dave had to open his mouth. In any case, how about beyond that? What if they said Bond animated series?
We had that with James Bond Jr.
Yeah, but I mean, they're saying like they start doing an actual animated, because you were talking about, like, you guys were talking about, well, we have how many different Batmans? How many different Spider-Mans do we have right now? We have a live action Spider-Man. We have a Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney Plus, which is, I thought, was going to be the Tom Holland, adventures when he's in high school, but no, it's something different entirely. So you haven't, I think, to the point that having Bond in all these different eras and it confusing people, I think these days the audience, I mean, we're kind of more, on the one hand, we are kind of more accepting of multiverses, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Although I swear to God, I'm getting so tired of people talking about, oh, the same actor's got to play the same character the whole time. We can't recast, or if you recast, what's wrong? I can't. Why is Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Dr. Doom? He's Iron Man. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I mean, at watching 1923 with Timothy Dalton, I'm like, oh, the more I see Timothy Dalton, I see the next M. I mean,
I was going to say,
he would be an excellent M. And then you just play that in.
If the next series has completely breaks from any of the Eon films, you could have past actors. Pierce Brosnan is M, I mean, have a guy that you could play him for several movies before he croaks. They have they announced John Lithgow is going to be Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series for Max.
Mhm.
And I love John Lithgow, but I mean, he's already
Johnny Lithgow. Isn't he American? He's
Yeah, he
American.
can play a British guy. He can play an Englishman.
All right. Okay. I always feel like it goes the other way, or the other way more than it goes.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
But no, you can see him as Dumbledore.
Okay.
But, I mean, he's pushing 80, and realistically, how long is it going to take them to do? Well, were there 7 books?
There are 7 books, and they want to do a limited series of each book.
Yeah. So they might have another Richard Harris situation where he.
Oh God.
Because I'm thinking to your point, Tom. I will accept a lot of things with Bond. I don't think I can accept them casting an American as James Bond.
No, for sure not. No.
Yeah, just like they can never cast an American as Doctor Who.
Yeah.
You know, for a while there was talk. I mean, that's what a lot of folks were thinking, that when Disney started, took on the Doctor Who IP for the streaming, and then we're putting, Disney money into Doctor Who, which is still produced by the BBC and which is still effing brilliant. I mean, I love it even more now. But yeah, if they start taking away the Britishness of it, I would be now. Hold on. So Eon is completely divorced of James Bond now, right? It's not even like they're going to say produced by Amazon and Eon Productions, or it's all Amazon now.
I believe so. Yes.
Because I think Amazon bought MGM,
Yeah.
which included Bond, kind of like when Disney bought Lucasfilm, which included Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all that other stuff. I'm just curious why they wouldn't want to keep, like Amazon want to keep some of the Eon folks, keep that British production too. I mean, you've got the freaking Elstree Studios in London, that's where the Bond movies are made, where they make the Star Wars movies and the Marvel movies. There, it's just that huge set where they do all that. It started making the Bond movies. I gotta believe that they're gonna keep some of those people, just at least for the institutional knowledge. Keep that through line going.
You know what occurred to me as the idea of the short series for doing individual books set in period time, the Hercule Poirot series off of the David Suchet, which was always consistently high in quality. Although I've said this before, the one though that I would want to see as a one-off, as just a one-off, and allow complete temporal freedom to do it in terms of time set, is the Wes Anderson Bond movie. That's one that I absolutely want to see.
I just can't get into the Wes Anderson movies. I just can't. I've seen them. I'm like, I know people love it, and I'm sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. Visually speaking and artistically speaking, Wes Anderson is brilliant. As someone who just is a fan of movies in general, and when I see bad movies, I know what's a bad movie. Wes Anderson movies are not bad. They're actually quite good. They're just not my cup of tea. They're just like, I just don't get into them.
Yeah.
I would love to see Kenneth Branagh. I think Kenneth Branagh would be awesome.
That would be another one of your contenders for tone setter.
Yeah.
Like Branagh did the first Thor movie.
Yeah.
He worked with Simon Pegg. Did Baby Driver.
Edgar Wright.
Edgar Wright doing a Bond movie.
He's I think publicly made it known that he would love to do Bond, and that's a guy with like a very distinct style, Yeah.
Sure. Well, was it Last Night in Soho? Is that the movie?
Mm-hmm.
You could tell he was projecting that whole, like, I want to do a Bond movie in the 60s kind of thing. And of course, Matt Smith as a bastard. I was like going, oh yeah, I can see Matt Smith as Bond, but now he's starting to age out a bit. Unless I'm sorry. Oh, he would be an awesome Q. Actually, when you think about it, he would be brilliant as Q.
He's got kind of that face too. It's in the chin there.
Yeah, and he's got the eccentricities that he did as the Doctor. I could see him as this brilliant, engineer who makes all these incredible things for Bond. That is Dave. That is a brilliant bit. If anyone from Amazon is watching that, give my man credit here for that. But okay, so let's talk about it. Now looking at this, the next obvious thing is casting. And the more and more I think about it, the more I like the idea of Robert Pattinson. And he would be the first actor to play both Bond and Batman.
Yeah.
He'd be good.
I think the biggest missed opportunity, or what if of a guy being both Bond and Batman was Christian Bale. Because he would have nailed Bond.
Oh no, Christian Bale would have been incredible as Bond.
Yeah.
Or hell, what if you get Nolan? Nolan says, "Hey, we're gonna do Bond, and I want Bale to be my Bond." I'm telling you, they're box office right there. That's box office.
Christian Bale is currently 51 years old, so I don't know.
But it's one movie, and Bale says he will work. He would love to work with Nolan again. That's the only way he would do Batman again. It would only be with Christopher Nolan. So Nolan says, "Hey, you know what? I want to do the Bond movie that I've always wanted to do. Like it's like the last Bond story, by Chris Nolan."
And that's probably not a good way to start the next era.
No, but it would be like to kind of set up the tone of, from now on, Bonds can go anywhere. We can have Bond go anywhere, be anywhere. Because let's be honest, you're never going to have. You're not. I seriously doubt you're going to have anyone play Bond for more than Roger Moore did, than Daniel Craig did. You're lucky if you get an actor to do Bond for a trilogy. I have this feeling that's probably going to be what you get from now on.
Unless they can somehow, change their sort of the business model of Eon the last 15 or so years and get back to that routine of getting a new movie out every 2 to 3 years. Now, obviously, you want quality over quantity. I don't want a bunch of mediocre movies just to say, "Oh, I could, put it on my calendar, a new Bond movie every 2 years." I want high quality movies, and if that means waiting a little bit longer, so be it. I'd rather not have to wait 5 years between movies. I think there's a happy medium between a movie every year, like in the '60s, and 5 or 6 years between movies. But I think if you can get back to something like, the first couple Brosnan movies, where it was every 2 or 3 years, you could have a guy who could do 4 or 5 movies.
That's kind of what they did with the John Wick series. They did 4 movies. They released 4 movies over the span of 9 years.
Yeah, but it's I don't get the John Wick movies are all just stunts, just no real plot. I mean, to the point, Dave. I mean, and Tom, you've seen that diagram, the 3-point star for graphic design. You can either have it. It can either be good, it can be fast, or it can be cheap. If you want it good and fast, it ain't gonna happen. If you want it good, you can get it good and cheap, or it's gonna, or it's gonna be good. And I think with Bond movies, this is a bit that you talk about. I know you've talked about this, Dave, about the long delay between the Bond movies. And as I've said on Top Men, hey, welcome to my world. I've had to wait how long for every Indiana Jones movie, and it seems like the wait got exponentially longer with each one. And then you have indie fans who bitch and moan that, we only got so many Indiana Jones movies when George Lucas said it was going to be the next Bond, and we could have gotten this, this, and this. And they're going, again, if you want plenty of indie movies, you're going to have some stinkers in there, right? You just want to start cranking them out.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, I mean, I overall the Indiana Jones series, yes, I will include Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
Overall, most enjoyable series I've been involved with. That's non-problematic like Harry Potter now because of freaking J.K. Rowling. I mean, the Harry Potter series for quality across the board, probably the top out there.
Yeah.
And then to me, Indiana Jones, because then Star Wars is like people hate every other Star Wars movie, like with Star Trek, right? So with Bond, I mean, again, we go back and we look at the different Bond movies, and I will be amused when people want to crap on the Pierce Brosnan films. I'm going, Pierce was a great Bond. I mean, yeah, the outside of GoldenEye, the scripts weren't great, but he was a pretty good Bond and reflective of each time. And you were getting your movies, da, da, da. So what do you want? Do you want many? I mean, again, you want them good? You want them fast? You want them cheap? Oh, and I'm sorry to say, Amazon's going to probably want stuff relatively cheap over time.
Yeah.
That's going to be a thing that's going to come up.
With the Craig movies, admittedly, most of the delays, I mean, he did 5 movies. The first 3, that was 3 over the course of 6 years, that's pretty good. Average.
And one of them was interrupted by a writer's strike. So one of them had a writer's strike in the middle of it. That was
Quantum of Solace, which
Quantum of Solace.
That
it
the big
suffered from that.
delays with Spectre and No Time to Die. The first Spectre with some financial issues going on with MGM, and then No Time to Die. Obviously, there was a global pandemic, so
yes,
those something out of the control of the Bond producers' hands. So, but they pretty good track record for the Craig era, at least the first 3 movies.
I mean, for overall, the Craig era films of all the Bond movies probably hit the highest bar, had the highest level, script, production, quality, acting, everything.
Yeah.
And then, again, we've done this in previous episodes. We've gone over all the movies. Yes, Sean Connery is incredible. He has a charisma, but when you really watch his movies, okay. And even though I love Roger Moore because he was my Bond growing up, and No Time, not that Live and Let Die, because it was like the first Bond movie I actually sat down and watched it. I watched it on television, and I thought that was so cool. And it's my favorite theme song, or at least when I first saw it. And then on the rewatch for for Shaken Not Heard, I was like, oh boy, wow, this is a kung fu movie. Who knew? Who knew that? No, I'm sorry. That was Which one was the
Man with the Golden Gun?
Man with the Golden Gun was a kung fu movie. Yeah. The No Time to I'm sorry, Live and Let Die is like, oh, that's right. This is a Harlem blaxploitation. Okay, oops. Yeah, this is a tad problematic here. Yeah. So yeah, people will go, oh, but the Broccoli movies are all great. No, and it's something that we'll have to learn to accept and talk about as fans when the next era of Bond begins. So when you have, and this is going to happen, you're going to go, Eon never would have done something like this. Oh, that was so exploitative, or it was so, they're just trying to, what's the big thing that they're saying now? Oh, they're just trying to get in with a younger crowd. They're just trying to appeal to, to the younger audience. Like, that's what they did with, the making Bond a kung fu movie.
Or sending Bond into space in
Moonraker. Yeah. Which I submit is still better than people say it is.
Absolutely. I love Moonraker.
Again, folks, go back, watch the Moonraker episode where even I am surprised. I kept waiting for it to go, oh, wow, that was kind of bad. That was kind of cringy. I'm going, actually, no, that was better than I expected. Also, more prescient than I expected. I mean, Hugo Drax. Holy crap, we don't need Elon Musk. There he is.
Well, there's stuff that, the real kind of stick up their butts Bond fans will say, oh, there's stuff Barbara Broccoli did under her control that her father never would have. He never would have killed off James Bond. So they
Right.
always look to compare things to what the previous, the previous boss would have done, and that will inevitably happen with whatever direction they take with the next movie. Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson never would have done this. Well, there's a lot of stuff that they did that I'm sure Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman never would have did, but it happened anyway. So, and the franchise survived.
Yeah, and that's, I think, will be, again, all the previous 24 Bond movies aren't going anywhere.
Yeah,
they're there. You can have them. You can watch them as many times as you want.
26 if you count Never Say Never Again.
Seriously, someone needs to go in and like rescore that thing, and then they put it out on Blu-ray.
Yeah,
because that
would be an awesome, if that would very much endear Amazon to me. If they said, we're going to put there's this campaign for Warner to get Warner Brothers to do the finished Schumacher cut of Batman Forever, but it's not like totally finished because some of the effects aren't there, and they'd have to add some music that wasn't finished for the full cut. But like redo the score, put the gun barrel in the beginning, have the classic opening credits with the naked women swimming and floating through have it look like and that would improve the movie so much. I'm agreeing with you. It's actually, I might actually prefer it to Thunderball. It definitely moves at a quicker pace than Thunderball.
I preferred it to Thunderball. Yeah. As they're going, the ending was kind of goofy, but no, I'm sorry. The ending to Thunderball was goofy.
Yeah. Well, at the time it was cutting.
They're on a boat. The boat's out of control.
Sped up,
really?
Artificially sped up, and it looks ridiculous. But again, 1965, this was like mind-blowing stuff.
Right. But the Never Say Never Again had Irvin Kershner, who would direct The Empire Strikes Back. It's probably one of the most gorgeous movies as far as cinematography and framing, and just the bit Bond on a motorcycle with the black helmet and the black tuxedo.
You just need the Bond blaring instead of the ridiculous music they actually used.
Yeah, that would be, again, you change the music, it changes the movie.
Yeah,
yeah. So stuff like that, like if Amazon decided to do that, that would be pretty cool. That would be pretty awesome. All right. Any final thoughts before we call it a day? As far as saying, any thoughts that we want to share with Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson as this era comes to an end?
You did a great job. They weren't always perfect, but we always had a good time.
Yeah.
And anytime that someone can show you an enjoyable evening at the movies consistently for 30 years, that's standing ovation. A job well done and a legacy well earned, and enjoy what you've made. You did a fantastic job.
Yeah, and enjoy the $1 billion you got from.
Enjoy the $1 billion. I'm sure I trust Barbara Broccoli with $1 billion more than I think I would trust just about anyone else running around these days. So. Yeah.
It's like I want to figure out how can I get in contact with them to pitch him stuff. You got $1 billion. Oh, I will say, if that's all they got, they kind of got robbed. I look at George Lucas getting $4 billion for Lucasfilm, which at the time seemed like a lot, but now you look at what Marvel went for, and I forgot what other. There was another franchise that went. Somebody bought up somebody else for like a ridiculous amount of money, like $10-12 billion, just to take all that IP. And it seems like, wow, that's it. Wow. What's the first $1 trillion IP? I'm wondering. Well, yeah. Guys, hey, thank you so much for, I know we threw this together kind of at the last minute, but I thought, hey, we got to strike while the iron is hot.
We didn't even talk about the Oscars.
Well,
Okay, I saw that. I saw it. I finally watched it.
Yeah.
Folks, for those who, again, like Dave and Tom and I, we know each other, and we, even though we don't have a show on the regular right now, although I think it's time to bring back the MCU review in some
Oh, I
form.
got drinks.
Okay, with all the stuff that's coming up, all the stuff that's going on, I think we're probably ready to bring it back. But anyway, so Dave, Tom, and John Clark, who is part of the MCU review, we have a group text that we go. And Tom sent the video of the Oscars Bond tribute. And what did you call it, an abomination or something like that?
Did I? Did
What
I
is this
call it?
abomination or something?
No, what did I call
I can't remember. I thought, or atrocity, or I mean, all I know is that you did not like it. So let's just say I went in going, okay, this is going to be bad, and then I watched it and I was like, I actually kind of liked it. Why? Why did I? Because a lot of folks, a couple comments I saw, not just from you guys, but from people on social media, they had a Bond tribute and not a single Bond was involved with it. Like none of the actors was involved. Plus, none of the artists who had sung the songs previously were involved in this melody. They had all these new artists doing it. And yes, oh my goodness, going down the Bond pages and the fan pages, I was hearing, and people just were not happy. They were ripping it. They're going, I don't even know who this artist is. They didn't even do it the way, like, you know.
Oh, they wouldn't recognize Shirley Bassey if they saw her picture.
Right, stuff like that. Right. So I'm like, and I'm there going, folks, here's the deal. And this is, again, the something that I guess I've accepted, and I'm sure you guys are mature enough to know. These characters, these IPs, these experiences, these movies, it's no longer being created for us anymore. Okay, that's nostalgia. The nostalgia part is in the past. This was made with contemporary artists, newer artists, reinterpreting these themes for a new generation, a new audience. And while some of the purists might go, I didn't like it, others were like, oh, that was kind of cool. I didn't know that. Because again, this is what I learned during previous episodes of this very show, how much I love the theme to Live and Let Die. And then I have John Clark, our music specialist, talking about, yeah, that theme's not that great. So
I was a little confused as to why they had Live and Let Die first. That kind of, it seems to me
because
like,
it's the best theme.
you put it at the end. That's your closer. That's your closer.
Technically opened with the Bond theme. Which
Yeah,
I thought was
the
the coolest
open
part.
with, yeah, I mean that was a cool part. And then I feel like you close with Live. That's your 3-hole hitter. That's your cleanup batter right there. That's not your lead off. That's the one with that's the one with the power stats in it.
Yeah,
you lead off with Diamonds Are Forever, and then you finished with Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
Look, even you, Tom and Dave, you guys are will get this this analogy. Even Frank Thomas took a walk. So.
Very famous for taking lots of walks. Yes.
Yeah.
And getting people mad at him for it.
Yes.
Why are you walking so much? All right. Well, the gremlin has been there, so thanks. It's so nice to see the gremlin yet again. How's he doing?
He's good. Hanging in there.
It's good.
I'm used to life with a toddler around.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That makes me happy to see him and see him doing well.
Yeah.
All right, guys. It's been so good to see you. Before we go, as always, tell us, where can people follow you on your socials?
I am at Pinto_Noir on Instagram, which is, I do post pictures of this guy, but also there's been a lot more pictures of my I like to call him my legally bald son. My wife hates when I call him bald. He has plenty of hair, but I have got a joke with my buddy Mike, who is his godfather, that now somebody who's legally blind still has some vision. He is legally bald, even though he has some hair. So even when he has flowing manes at some point, we're still going to call him bald. I'm sure he's going to.
Wow. This is and this will be on the internet forever, so you can always show it to your kid later on. Yes, and I mean, I think he's in line to be the next Bond too.
He is.
Got to cast him young.
Cast American. He just has to learn to speak first.
Well, you guys move to Great Britain, and then he'll pick up the accent over time.
Yeah.
Tom?
You can find all the drinks for that including the one I've done tonight for Shaken Not Heard, including many, many martinis and other drinks that I've done for MCU Review and Top Men at REVU Cocktails on the Instagram app. Please give it a like or a follow and take a look. We've got some good ones up there, and I always try to hit it out of the park with the music on the post as best I can.
Oh no, you've gotten quite good. You're was it that what did Anakin say to Dooku at Revenge of the Sith? My powers have tripled since we've last met. That's been your presentation, like from the beginning to boom. Wow, look at that.
I honestly think there was a shot that I had. This was a couple of weeks ago for when I revisited the Vesper, and the second frame in that shot is of my my go-to straight dry martini with Skyfall by Adele over the top of that. I think that's the best one I've ever done. I just look at that and I think like, oh, that's just like, it's like, that's it. That's the best one that I'll do. I'm like, I don't know if I'll top that one. But yes, hopefully we could do, if we do more MCU, I really do want to do No Way Home because, and I will make an effort to get drinks to everyone in that instance because I honestly believe that that's the best drink that I've ever made.
We did No Way Home though, didn't we?
I thought we did that one.
Nope, we did Far From Home.
Oh yeah, okay.
We did Far From Home. No Way Home is that's on the REVU Cocktails page. It's on there. It's the one with the little Spider-Man figure on it. But that's the best one. I think that's honestly the best one that I've done. So
we never did No Way Home.
No.
Wow. I can't believe that John let us get away with that.
Apparently.
And it was like, again, the last big super Marvel movie that everyone loved pretty much unanimously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although Captain America did better than people have been saying, and I enjoyed it. Man, Harrison Ford would be a great M.
Oh, God.
There we go. We'll be back, folks.
We'll be back, folks.
like James Bond, this crew will return. I'm Elliot Serrano. You can find me on all the socials at Elliot Serrano with 2 L's, 2 T's, and 2 R's. Oh, yes, you can search on YouTube for The Torn Quadcast for my wrestling, pro wrestling, and sports entertainment show that I co-host with Mark Allen Fishman of the Unshaven Comics group. And this guy will be back, folks. I don't know where, I don't know when, but it will be probably sooner than you expect and in a place you don't expect. Turn around. There we are. All right, guys. For Dave Pino and Tom Chetner, I'm Elliot Serrano. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Good night, everyone.
Good night.